So- I'm Lexi.
And I'm Danny.
Welcome to Girl Preach Podcast.
Episode number 2.
Yes, we are so excited. You guys have no idea.
We have just been trying so hard to get these videos recorded, and we've had so many technical difficulties, but I think that we're finally getting the hang of it, getting the kinks worked out.
Let me tell you, being beginners at anything, you just have to be okay with it.
Right.
Yes. Anyways, after our little soapbox there, this is Girl Preach Podcast. It's just a podcast where we come together to have conversations with each other,
Right.
but more so to open them up to you guys, just about the Bible and the things that we see happening in life and on social media.
Yeah. We're just inviting you into our conversations that we have as friends all the time. So,
and that's what we hope you guys get out of this.
Right.
It's just that you'll have these conversations with other believers, but dig deeper into your Bibles and not just hear what we say or what other pastors say or other podcast people say, but that you really find your ground in the Word of Jesus, and it just gets you curious.
Great. So today last week we talked about the church and what the church is and what it stands for, what it doesn't stand for, good things, bad things, just all church related things is what we talked about. This week we are talking about persecution.
Yay!
It's a hard topic. It's not a fun topic, but I think that it is a much needed topic, especially in today's world and in today's culture when there's such a varying types of persecution throughout the world. And so, let's kick it off with Lexi, why don't you give us your definition of persecution and your take on it?
Okay. So I'll give you the Google definition because Google's my best friend.
Right.
It says to run or flee, put to flight, or drive away. But then also, from looking in the Bible and just taking it back to the original language, it also says in any way whatsoever to harass, to trouble, to molest one, or to persecute. The Lexi definition is just so hard.
Right. It is so hard. And like I said, we all experience like different degrees, various degrees of persecution throughout our lives. And some of us might not ever have to put up with hardly anything. And some of us might, be like in this life-threatening situation. And it varies. So when you think persecution, where does your mind go to? Like, where in the world? Like America? Like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, definitely when I'm thinking of persecution, I think China. And North Korea too. Just, I know people who have been kicked out of China just for being missionaries over there. And I just think of other countries more so than I think of the U.S. Even whenever I was applying to work as a missionary someplace else, I asked if I could talk to people about it just to see what they had to say because I was nervous and I just wanted to know their experiences. And they had to prep me on how to talk to them just in case somebody was reading their emails. And I'm like, yeah, they're like for real persecution happening there.
Right.
And I don't think we see that as much here in the US.
Right.
In the same way.
Right. I think that like US wise, like we're seeing more of it socially and economically because you have like cancel culture and you have just kind of the if you aren't with us you're against us type of mentality. There's no agree to disagree anymore. And I think that like we are seeing a little bit more of like that type of persecution, but like no one's coming for like our lives or like our families, you know what I mean? But I think cancel culture has really like pushed that persecution agenda like a little bit further.
Well, and I think that a lot of social persecution comes from biases because there was a lot of stuff done in the name of Christianity that had gotten nowhere in it. Right. And even the way that Christians present themselves sometimes, which I would argue are they Christians, but that have just built up this idea of Christianity that gets pushed on everybody no matter what you do. And people think that you're automatically just judging or hating just because you say you're a Christian, and that's not always the case. So that you do get pushed back a lot in situations like that.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Yes. Persecution. It's so fun. I feel like we don't get a lot of physical persecution, or I haven't seen it a lot in my life. But let me tell you, like, spiritual persecution, I have felt that so heavy lately.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a side of persecution that people don't really talk about as much.
Right. And I think a lot of it can come from, like, inside the church as well. Like, Christians persecute other Christians. Like,
they do. And Christians persecute, not Christians.
They do. Like, it comes from, like, both sides. And I think most people, when you hear, especially, like, raised in the Bible Belt, like we have been, and raised, like, in conservative churches, when we hear persecution, like, our mind goes to China, our mind goes to North Korea, our mind goes to, like, Islamic countries, things like that, communist countries. But we don't necessarily think of it as being something that happens to non-Christians. And, like, I mean, look at, like, persecution, like, right now, like, persecution against, like, Muslims, and persecution against Jews, and you know, like, it's of all kinds. Like, it's not just Christians. Christians can persecute Christians. Christians persecute non-Christians, like you said. And
just as society, we just hurt each other.
Right.
Which is very heartbreaking, especially when it's Christians doing the hurting, because we're supposed to be the ones doing the healing and the ones that are supposed to be bringing people to Christ and showing them the love of Christ. And instead, you have Christians who are standing with posters in their hands, like yelling at people. And whether you agree or disagree with people's choices, that doesn't necessarily matter, because we can't force people to have our beliefs, and God gives them the free will to have their beliefs, and we have to let them. Like, we can offer to help, and we can be there as a friend, and we can do everything we can to help them in situations and to guide them, but ultimately they get to make their own choices, and we have to let them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's just, I think you see it a lot more, like, in conservative states than you do, like, in non-conservative states, you know, like big cities and stuff. And I mean, you'll see it some there too, but I think you see it more here. And I think that also goes for, like, Christians treat non-Christians like that, but, like, they also treat other Christians like that. Like, I feel like we have a really bad habit as Christ followers of trying to play the role of the Holy Spirit, and we are continuously making other believers' lives harder than they have to be, instead of just, like, letting go and, like, allowing the Holy Spirit to convict and to move them or remove things from their lives. Like, we're constantly, like, I mean, just dragging through the mud. And I'm not saying that that is, like, I mean, it's a form of persecution. I feel like it's not, maybe harassment is a better word. I don't really know.
I just think that life is already hard enough, because we live in a fallen world where sin runs pretty
rampant.
And life is really hard, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a non-Christian, whatever you believe in, and just tearing each other down doesn't help that. And let me be honest, I have places in my past, even pretty recently, where I've done something hateful to somebody, and I've had to be like, wait a minute, that was wrong. And I had good intentions, but that's not how it came off. And I've had to apologize for that. I've had to.
And it's not easy to apologize either.
It's not. Oh, it's not.
I'm awful at apologizing, and I can admit that. Like, it's hard for me. Like, and I know that that's pride, and I know that it's ego that, like, gets in the way, and, like, you want to believe that you're right in a situation, and it is hard to apologize. But my question is, so persecution, is it a good or a bad thing?
I mean, it sucks to go through. It's not fun. But I think it is ultimately a good thing. Just, I guess it depends on where you stand. If you're a Christian, it is a way to build you up. I actually have James written in here this time. Just to read here in a minute. But I think that as Christians, you know, we need to go through hard times, because if not, it produces laziness, and it produces comfort areas and places for us to just be and exist without actually coming to the cross and doing the battle and the work that God has called us to do, because life is too easy for us. Whereas if you're not a Christian and there's, like, you don't see a point in your persecution, then obviously you're not going to see how the persecution is actually helping you and making you better and changing things. Which I don't want to say that for everybody, because some people do go through hard times and they come out the other side and they're like, you know what, I'm stronger now. But I think there's less hope. Right. You're not a Christian and you have to go through stuff like that.
Right. You don't have that hope to hold on to like we do. Yeah. I just think of I think it's, when it comes to persecution, like you said, it sucks to go through, but if you don't go through it, it produces laziness. But also biblically, when you see persecution in the Bible, you see this massive crazy growth of the New Testament church and the church, the first established churches. Once you start seeing persecution, especially Acts, you really start seeing that ramp up, and you see the establishment of the first church. And it's, I think that if you don't have persecution, you're not going to have healthy churches. You're not going to have growth.
Yes. And it's harder to weed out the false Christians if there's no persecution, because a lot of people question, how do you know that God is the way? How do you know that the Bible is true? But you have people who gave their lives, who've gone through some crazy things that no person would ever go through if it wasn't for a reason. Right. And if there's no persecution, then people who would cave under persecution, who would be like, oh, I was just in this for the fun times, they get to go run rapid. And that's why you see a lot of these celebrity pastors or people who,
these mega churches,
they live this really good phase and it looks like they're doing a lot of great stuff for Christianity,
like Bethel.
When it comes down to it, right? And you can't see their fruits yet because there's been no persecution to produce those fruits or to show how they really are. Right. And I also think too, though, when you think about it, persecution, it forces us to rely on God. Some of the stuff that I've had to go through in the last few months, I never would have gotten through it myself. Right. There's been times that I don't really know how to explain it, but I just feel like I'm just lying in a hole, just
barely treading water,
giving up on life, and just what's the point? How am I going to get through this? And if it wasn't for God and me having to rely on Him, I would have never made it.
One of the biggest thing that irks me, when I hear it, is God won't give you more than you can handle, and I'm like, yeah, He does give you more than you can handle, because
it's not about you.
Well, if He only gave you what you can handle, then you wouldn't ask for His help.
Yeah, you wouldn't need Him.
You wouldn't need Him. So of course He gives you more than you can handle. But I mean, you see how persecution breeds faith, and persecution, it just breeds, I don't know, but you can see it in all of the persecuted countries like China and North Korea. Those churches are exploding, and over there you can be put to death, for your faith. But yet you're seeing this rise in numbers of Christianity that's far surpassing the United States, and it's why
blows my mind.
Yeah,
because when I think about especially North Korea, just being in South Korea and being so close and just thinking if I was just a little bit farther away, I could literally die for having a Bible, because I traveled with my Bible there.
Yeah, same when I was there too.
Yeah, and just thinking that if they knew who I was, I would never make it. But then I found out that I thought they were so closed off. I did not think that Christians
you really can go in.
Yeah. But there's missionaries over there, and I didn't know that, which just, I don't know, blows my mind. Right. Because it's just thinking that, I was so sad for them, and I'm like, God, they really need you. And he's like, I got this. I'm doing
I'm doing it.
Yeah. And
I'm one step ahead of you, Lex.
Yeah. And it just makes me so happy, because
I mean, I thought that too. I was like, I had the idea and the impression that there were no missionaries in those countries. I mean, China, I knew that there was, but especially North Korea and things like that, places like that, I just would have never in a million years thought that there was people that were allowed in, much less Christians. And I mean, you see it exploding over there. And I know that God is doing amazing things, and not that I want persecution for the United States, but I would like to see the United States, the churches here in America, revitalized. I would like to see, and if that means a little bit of persecution and a little bit of more hard times, then I kind of welcome it because we need that. Like, we have so many lazy and complacent Christians who consider persecution not getting to use their tax-exempt card, like, for their ministries. And I'm just like...
It gets frustrating. Yeah. I get that. I like to pretend that I'm one of those people who, if I was persecuted, like, I'm going to do all of this great stuff, and, like, people are going to know my faith, and I'm going to be the person to shout it out.
Right.
But then in reality, situations where, like, you know what? Not that I was persecuted, but, like, even in not being persecuted, I'm not that person. And if I'm not that person when I'm not getting persecuted, how am I going to be that person when I am getting persecuted?
Right.
Because sometimes in social situations, like, it's not that I don't talk about God, because let's be honest, like, I talk about my faith quite a bit. But at the same time, I'm not the first one to jump up and be like, oh, I'll pray, or, like,
right,
really, like,
step out.
Yes.
Right.
And so then I'm like, and then the fact that, like, the little persecution that I do go through, I fall, and I fall big time. Like,
it's like, how can we think that we would handle the big, hard, life-threatening?
Like, even though I fall, and I fall into sin, or I do something that I'm just like, this is not what God has called me to do, I get back up. Like, I have my pity party, and I do the things that I shouldn't do, but then I get back up.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to stay here. And it's just like that initial punch just really gets me down. And I think that that's needed, because the more you get persecuted and the more that you have to go through that, it's not going to push you as far down every time. And I think that that's part of it, is that none of us are perfect, and none of us are going to be able to 100% stand on top of persecution. I mean, like, you see the disciples and how they handled things, but even them, like, they had to have had, like, times where they just felt like they were at the bottom, and we don't always get to hear that, because we're hearing their stories sometimes through other people, or we're hearing, like, their encouragement to other churches. We're not always hearing their despair. And I just like to believe that they're human like me.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that they had to have times like that. Especially, I say especially Paul, but I mean, he's like, I count it as joy. And I'm like, stop.
Trying to get to the place where I do count it as
right.
But it's just that, like, never going to be that perfect Christian who just endures persecution and is like, yay, I get to be, like, that's what they were saying. They were like, oh, we get to be persecuted like Jesus was. And I'm like,
no, do this. God, please take this from me. No.
I'm the strongest soldier.
Right. No, I agree. Like, I'm drunk. Like, I'm sorry.
I'll repeat whatever what I put down in James. Okay. So I was doing a study by Francis Chan, and it's over James. And when he was talking about it, he was just talking about the process that people would do to make swords and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And how, like, it had to go into the. I'll just read it. It's fine.
Okay.
Consider pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, which we already know that we don't always do that, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. So there's so much more in that. But I think that just for us is that, like, it produces the perseverance. And the thing that Francis Chan had said was, I have to read it because I wrote it down. He said the word for testing, which I'm going to say the word, but don't get on to me for the way I pronounce it. I tried to write it, like, exactly, but it's probably going to be wrong. It's Dokimion? I don't know. Was often used to describe precious metals put through extreme heat to remove impurities, becoming so pure you can see your reflection in it. And I think it's just that remembering that even though it is hard and that we don't always count it as joy, when you come out on the other side of it, like, years from now, I'm going to look back on these past year and I'm going to be so grateful that I had to go through this stuff. I don't feel it right now.
Yeah.
But I am going to find the joy in it. And I'm going to be like, that led to me being where I'm at now.
Right.
And had I not gone through it, then
kind of like what we learned about last night.
yes.
I mean, honestly, kind of not that she was necessarily talking about persecution, but just like hard times and like spiritual warfare and things like that, like that character that you have is developed in the hard times. It's developed in the prison. It's developed, when you are being persecuted, and God is preparing you and he's using that for something good, for something in the future, something better. Like in Genesis when, Joseph's he says, what you meant for bad, God meant for good, like what we learned about last night. Like that's so true. And I had the thought and I had to jot it down before I lost it. If we're not going through persecution and we're not facing persecution from the world, we're not experiencing attacks from the enemy camp, then we're not really a threat.
Yeah.
And
because what are we doing?
Exactly. And so to me, if I'm not experiencing some type of that in my life, I think that that's kind of like we should be like, whoa, am I too lax? Like, what's going on? Like, what am I not doing right? Because if I'm not facing some type of hardship, and not saying we should go looking for that, but if we're not facing some type of difficulty or some type of hardship or some type of persecution in our lives, chances are we're not on the right track and we're not where we need to be because Satan's not threatened by that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of how I take it.
I agree. I think that it's important. I keep going back to the fruits, but the churches that you go to and the people that you look up to, I went through this season and I'm still a little bit in it where I was having the hardest time finding preachers that I wanted to listen to because it was almost like every time I would hear something preach, something major would come out and it was just like this roller coaster. And listen, in my Bible, like I think I have a pretty good foundation of things, but I wouldn't catch what was happening or like the fact that they weren't maybe good preachers. But then when their fruits came out, I could recognize it and I could be like, wait a minute, this isn't okay. And I think that we need to be looking at our churches and looking at people to be like, wait a minute, is their lives like, are they living the high life right now?
Right.
And everything's just great and nothing ever goes bad and like they're spreading the message, but yet things are great. Like that should put up a flag for you to be like, wait a minute, because it shouldn't. It's not always going to be like that, especially if you are a threat to Satan, because you're on a different page and you're fighting against each other, and he's going to come for you.
Right. I think also in that, like, you judge a church by its fruits, like, or a person by its fruits, and so like, you say you're looking at these pastors and you're trying to like figure out who to listen to and like, who to soak in and all of that stuff, I feel like also it was never designed to be like that. You know what I mean? It was never designed for us to have access to 100 different people on the internet, pastors, and it's so easy to fake those fruits for an hour and a half televised.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's easy to fake that. And I think that part of the way that the church was designed and set up, it was for real everyday communion with each other and the breaking of bread and the fellowship. And if you're with people that long and that much and you know their heart and you really fellowship and you become a body with them, it's not so easy to fake those fruits. It's not so easy to fake that. You know what I mean?
And here's the thing, even saying that, yes, you're going to have people who truly do love God and who are truly trying to do their things, and things are going to come out about them. But what you're looking for is how they respond. Right. Are they like shutting down, going away, living their lives? Like, what are they doing on the other side of that?
Right. Are they repentful? Are they,
Are they sincere? And then if they are repentful and they do get back in, like they're in the church,
right? Are
they showing that in their everyday lives, or are they trying to get back to where they were?
Right.
Because here's the thing: when we fall, we need time. We need time to heal. We need time to grow. And throwing people right back into the middle of the chaos that got them in trouble in the first place is never going to produce what you wanted to.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. I think just lately in my own life, I was listening to a song the other day, and I told you this when we were driving the other day. But sometimes songs just come on when you need them the most.
Right.
And
you could have heard them 1,000 times, but like one will hit specifically, and it's just
And the song that came on was that song by Matthew West. Something like "Always Pray" or "Don't Forget to Pray" or "Don't Stop Praying" or something. I'm so sorry if he ever. But the song just hit me so hard because every time that I feel like I'm coming out of it and I'm getting my feet on for like a foundation, which God is my foundation, but sometimes I fall and I need to get set back onto that.
Right.
And every time I think that I do, it's like something comes out and just pushes me right back off. And I was just listening to that song and I was like, the song's like is exactly like describing how I feel. It's exactly what I needed to hear. But then I was also thinking about it. You know, we like to say that God always answers prayers, but he doesn't always answer his prayers the way that we want him to.
Right.
And I think that the last year of my life, I've been praying and expecting my life to go one way, and God and I are not on the same page. And so every single prayer that I have prayed, he has done the exact opposite of what I've wanted. And I'm just like thinking about that and thinking because, you know, you start to get a little bitter whenever you're like, do you even care what I want, God? Like, because it says that our desires are going to match, you know, and we're going to get close to God to where we're on the same track. And I just feel like I'm way over here trying to go this way, and God's like way over here pulling me into all of these places that I honestly didn't want to be.
Didn't want to be.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, like, no, he's not answering my prayers right now, and it makes it hard to pray, and it makes it hard to trust. But then just thinking about it and thinking that, you know, one day, like, I'm going to see his plan, and it kind of just reminds me about what was talked about yesterday. Yeah. And just, like, you know, God has the perfect plan, the perfect time for us.
Like, God heard Joseph's cries.
Yeah. But let him go through what he had to go through.
To prepare him for what he needed him for.
To save.
Yeah.
All those lives. Yeah. You know, and to just, like, be reunited with his brothers and show that forgiveness that I'm sure was, like, a huge moment just in their lives. And I was listening to that song and I was like, okay. I'm like, he's not answering my prayers because I'm not where I need to be right now. And I need to get back to him, and I need to realize that regardless of what I want and where I want to be, he's going to make sure that I get where I need to be. Right. And I need to trust him and keep praying. Right. And set my feet on that foundation of he's still there. And he's still active. Right. And I just don't do a good job having all of the example people, the way that they react. I don't do a good job imitating.
It's, like, hard, though, because, I mean, growing up in church, like, I often will tell my husband, like, I know the Sunday school answer. I know the answer. I know why we're going through this. Not necessarily why, but I know that it's for a reason. I know it's going to come together for good. I know all of those things. But that doesn't negate the emotion behind it. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't erase the hardships. That doesn't erase the pain. That doesn't erase the I want answers. And even if God gave me those answers, what good would they do? Yeah. They wouldn't do any good.
It might be overwhelming. If he gave us picture, it would be too overwhelming. Yeah. Like, thinking, how am I supposed to get there? Right. And
but God, are you sure? And then I feel like we would start questioning God. Like, God, are you sure that that's really, like, you know? And, like, would we try to take shortcuts? Would we try to get there in a way that's not going to have us prepared for that? You know what I mean?
We'd be like, if we could do this and this and this, we could take off this many months and be there faster. But then we would miss all the lessons that would build us up and prepare us for what we need to be. Because that's just such a big thing of being prepared. Like, he's building our character. And I wish I had my notes from last night because I feel like I'm just taking
I have mine.
But it was just like building our character and forming us into who we need to be so that we can handle what's going to come to us. Yeah. Because there's still going to be persecution when we make it to the big picture.
She said that it's a slow working and it's an unfolding. And it could be God's plan is unfolding in front of us, but it doesn't look like what we think it should look like. And like in Joseph, like he wasn't aware that God was working, but God was working. He just didn't see it. And I think that that's us.
We didn't say it, but the she that we were talking about is Lisa Trickhurst. We went to see her last night.
It was so good.
And it was amazing.
It was just what our little hearts needed.
It was so good. But I think she just hit it on the head. And honestly, I think it's a little funny that we went to see that last night, and then here we are today and recording this podcast, saying all of these things, and it just like aligns.
So do you think what Joseph went through was persecution, or do you think it was just a hardship? Because I think you can have hardships in spiritual warfare that's not necessarily like persecution per se, but
well, his brother sold him into slavery. His wife had him thrown in jail for something he didn't do. I do think that those things
persecution.
Would be persecution.
Yeah.
I think maybe staying in jail and being forgotten. Maybe just a hardship. Like they just forgot about him. Like nobody was actively faithful to him.
Right.
Well, I don't know. It wasn't there, so I can't speak for them.
Right.
Maybe they were being purposely hateful.
Right.
But I do think that some of it was persecution. I think anytime there's an act against another person, that's persecution.
Yeah.
But I do think some of it's hardships too.
Yeah. I agree.
Yes. But it's about the growth.
It's about the growth that comes from it. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I mean, you see that all through the New Testament. Like I said earlier, like you don't really see growth and fruitfulness without first seeing like the persecution that comes before it. And I think that it's so important. Like I said, if you're not being persecuted, if you're not experiencing spiritual warfare, if you're not experiencing these things, then chances are you're not a threat. And that's a problem. As a Christian, that's a problem. I feel like we should always be a threat to Satan and his demons. I think that we should always be a threat to that because we should be fighting so hard for the kingdom of God. And if we're not, then that's a problem. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. So let me ask you this though, because there's a verse in the Bible, and it's basically used as a wedding verse, where two, like, a cord of 3 strands can't be broken. Mm-hmm. I should have looked it up beforehand.
Yeah.
I was trying it, but it would take me a while.
Right.
But basically it was talking about, like, when somebody falls down and you're walking with somebody, they can pick you back up. Mm-hmm. But then it goes on to say, like, pity the person who falls and has nobody there to pick him up, right? So, like, you're married. You're going through life with your husband and your family. And so whenever you guys are living like 3 hours away, and your mom and them couldn't just always be right there. Like, if you went through stuff, like, you guys had each other to lean on, like, and stuff. So, I'm not married. Like, we have anybody. So then I was in my little pity party the other day, and I was just sitting there, and I was like, Lord, I'm just so tired of falling and not having people here to pick me up. Because, yes, I have amazing friends. Like, I love you guys to death. But you guys don't always know what's going on in my life. And
it's not the same as someone that you live with. Yes.
I'm not going to be in the mindset of, I need to call these people.
Yeah.
Just because you guys aren't always available, or, like, I'm just not in that place where I can make that effort at that moment. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, God, I'm so tired of falling and, like, being that person that people should pity. Because of this. And I was just thinking through it, and I was like, there's a reason why in the Bible, when people are going on their mission trip, they're in that with people. And there was never a time anybody went anywhere by themselves, except whenever you look at Elijah's story. Like, I know that's Old Testament, but Elijah was alone, and he fell, and he was in such a depressed state. And then when he got out of that, God brought him somebody. And he got to continue his ministry with Elijah.
Right.
And I don't think that's actually how you say Elijah's name. I had a pastor say it one time.
No.
And I looked it up, and I was like, he's right, but I forgot how he said it. So I'm going to stick with the way that us ignorant people say it.
That's common folk.
Anyways, And I was just thinking about that whenever I was doing ministry and I got left by myself. That was the hardest thing. Like, I loved that ministry, and had there been a team, I never would have left.
Right.
But all I kept thinking is, there's a reason why there's always a team and why there's always people. Like, Jesus sent the disciples out in two. Anytime you read about Paul, he's surrounded by people. They did ministry together because they knew the dangers. And I think right now, like, I'm not in ministry. Like, yeah, I'm helping out at church and stuff, but I'm not in active
It's
ministry.
different. It's a different type of ministry than what we've both been involved in.
And typically that's fine, because whenever I was in the season before, I didn't have the strong persecution that I've had. I keep saying persecution. It's not that deep. It's just me being a baby.
The hard times. It's hard. It's difficult. It's an emotional
going
time.
through the season, I'm dealing with the lingering effects of that. Yeah. And it's like I keep falling and there's nobody here. Right. And I think that's why it's so important that we continue in community, because persecution or hard times, whatever you're going through, we can't do it alone. And yes, we need God, but we need other people too. Right. Like, there's a reason why the Bible modeled this example for us. Right. And I think we need to remember that, because we don't want to fall and have nobody there. Right. Because I could have stayed in that mindset, and eventually, because you have to still do life. Like, you're in the middle of hardships. You can't just, like, stop doing life. Like, I still had to go to work and everything else. So eventually I was around people who could encourage me and do stuff. But it was just in, like, the thick of it where I was just like, ugh, I feel so alone. Right. And I'm just so grateful that I have such a built-up community that I can lean on whenever I get there. Yeah. You know? And I think that we need to remember important to have community.
And I think that that's probably, like, one of the things that Chris and I have talked about the most, like, now more than ever within our churches. And not that, like, we're experiencing, like, some crazy wave of persecution, but, like, I would say now more than, like, maybe 20, 30 years ago, like, it is a little bit harder to be a Christian in America than it was. Like I said, just because of, like, the social and economical, like, things, like cancel culture and things like that, like, I feel like now more than ever we need that community within a church and within, like, friendships and stuff to, like, be able to pick each other back up, like you said. But what is the one thing, like, in America that, like, our home is, like, our safe haven away from everybody else? Like, we have such a fast-paced lifestyle here. And even, like, with people at church, like, we don't want to invite people over from church because we go to church, we spend time with them. But then when we're home, we're hardly ever home. We're running to t-ball games and basketball games, and we've got this and this and this. So, like, when we're home, we don't want to be around people. Like, we want to be, like, kind of like recluses, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like that's the exact opposite of what the New Testament church looked like. Like, they invited people into their homes and they were together all the time. And that's what we need. And we need that fellowship and community, because we weren't meant to live life on our own. Like, we are, like, social creatures by creation. So,
and just a whole other side of this. Okay. First of all, side note that has nothing to do with this. I'm cold now, and I'm going to turn off the AC. So I'm going to talk while we do this. Sorry, this isn't, like, typical podcast. What is it?
Etiquette?
Yes. But I got cold.
I've got my blanket. I'm just fine.
Okay. What was I talking about?
It's a very casual podcast.
Yeah. I hope you guys feel that.
I hope you feel like you're sitting in her living room with us, because that's what we want.
Yeah.
There's just not room for all of you here.
It's a okay, so what I was going to say is that with persecution, I think we miss out on the blessings that come from God, and we miss out of the glory that comes from God. Because the book Insanity of God that we read, you remember that?
Yeah, I have quotes on here in my notes. I'm not looking at my phone, by the way, guys. My notes are on here.
So we had to read this book, Insanity of God, before we went to Brazil. It was the homework. But in it, it was talking about, it was the part that stuck out to me the most, I think. I mean, that book has so much good things, but something that I just clung to, I guess, was the fact that there was this woman who came to America to visit, and they were sitting in church, and there happened to be a baptism that day, and she's just antsy, and she's looking around, and they were like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "They just got baptized. Like, why aren't you guys excited?"
Right.
In my country, I could be killed for baptizing people. And, it was just this thing. And, the joy and excitement that she saw just because they could freely baptize people here in the U.S. And the fact that, back home, it means so much more to do these acts that we are called to do because of the price that
it comes with it. Yeah, it is a life or death decision, and it's not a decision that they make on a whim at teen camp because they're emotional. Yeah. You know what I mean? It means if they make this decision, they could maybe die for that, and they're willing to make it, and it's a serious life. A life commitment to them.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of church hurt comes from, is that we have such fragile, not deep baby faith here. And we push this agenda of, say this prayer, ask Jesus into your heart. Mm-hmm. And there's no need. There's no, okay.
It's too comfortable.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of people at a young age will make these choices and then grow up
walk away from it.
And
it didn't cost them anything.
It didn't. But then they also look at the church and they're like, you guys are a bunch of fake people. What's the point of this? And you wouldn't have fake churches if persecution actually happened.
I feel like it would really weed out the rooted ones and the non-rooted ones. Because, it would.
It would.
As soon as things get a little bit more difficult, that's exactly what happens, And
I think you see that. So, because while I don't see as much persecution, in the physical sense here, you were talking about the social sense, you see pastors starting to conform to society because of the pressure that's put onto them. And I think that's how
people who start dancing around hot topics that won't directly answer what they do, what their beliefs on this or their stances on this. They won't give yes or no, heaven or hell answers because they don't want to be canceled, because they're afraid to be canceled. And it's just
cancel.
You cancel me. I have this theory about cancel culture, and I tell my husband this all the time because I see people on TikTok.
I wonder if you ran out of.
No. Okay. All right. I have this theory about cancel culture. And because Chris and I, we see these people getting canceled on TikTok or whatever all the time. And I have this theory. You can only be canceled if you allow them to cancel you. If you continue on and you continue to post, you're going to get some flack for a little bit, but eventually they're going to stop. You know what I mean? If you continue on and just don't care, then they can't. Who's going to cancel me? No.
And once they cancel you, or they get you into a place where you walk away or you delete stuff, people are like, "Oh, I knew it! This is true."
Right.
It's almost they go harder because you gave in.
Yeah.
And you showed them that maybe they are right, whereas it could have been.
If you just continue on,
yeah,
that's just my theory. You're only cancelable if you allow them to cancel you.
So fast. I see it all the time where a video will come out and the whole internet blows up because of this video, and then a couple days later, more comes out, and you get the whole story, and people are like, "Oh, wait a minute!" And people are ruining people's lives because of this, because they aren't patient enough to be like, "Wait, what's the whole story?"
Yes.
And then
they see a 30-second video.
Yes.
Well, there's a whole side of TikTok that I could rant on, because you also get people getting their theology from 30-second videos, and I'm like, but where's the scripture? Where's the meat in that? Because if there is scripture, a lot of times it's twisted, and I'm just like, but if you comment on it, you're a hater. You can't. It's just
yeah. And to be fair, we're not using a lot of scripture. We're not digging deep into the Bible for a lot of this podcast,
right?
But the things that we talk about, you can find in the Bible, and you can go in there and look for it, and we can give you references if that's what you want. And if we are,
but I'm also not trying to persuade people's theology either.
That's it. But we want to be held accountable. So, if we are doing something wrong, we're going to look into it and make sure that it's true, because some people are going to be like, we're wrong and we're not wrong. But, like, at the same time, like, I do want to.
We're not.
Yeah, I think it's important. So there was a girl, I love her to death. She's one of my favorites. I've been in youth ministry for so long, and you just love youth. Like, no matter what they do or anything, you just love them.
Right.
But she had posted something on Facebook one time, and it was just kind of like feeding an agenda. And I like looked into it, and I read it. I read what she posted, but then I also did more research and looked into it further, because if I was wrong, I wanted to know if I was wrong. But at the same time, if she was wrong, I wanted to like see,
lovingly show her where she was wrong.
So like, I didn't put it on Facebook. I privately talked to her.
You will never change someone's message mind by arguing with them in the comment section.
No,
like, you won't.
Never. But I was like, hey, like, thank you so much for putting this out there. Like, I did my research. I looked into it just in case. But I need you to know that it's still wrong. Like, what you put is still wrong. And I was like, but the thing is like, I love you, and I want you to know that I'm gonna look into things, because I want to be on your side. It's just that I'm not going to give up my ethics and my foundation of what I believe in Christ for something that's not true.
Right.
And I mean, we had a really good conversation, and I love her to death. But like, I think that's what we should do. We should come to each other lovingly, and we should take the time to read, to see where people are coming from. And I think there's a reason why they're coming from those places.
Right. And I think to bring it back to persecution and Christians making other Christians' lives harder, like, and people who you don't necessarily agree with, I think that that's where you get that from. Instead of like doing the research and lovingly bringing it to them, like you said you did, you have people getting on the comment section and just arguing and fighting and literally stressing everybody out. Like, what is the point? You know, like, you're never going to change their mind like that. Like, lovingly do your research, and from an unbiased standpoint too. You can't go in knowing, well, saying, I know I'm right, so let me look up verses that prove I'm right. No, I feel like you have to wipe that slate clean, and you have to go in and start from the ground and work up. And like you said, lovingly shoot them a message, lovingly talk to them, because if not, to bring it back to persecution, that's where a lot of this Christians making each other's lives harder comes from, is from big things like, because I know the situation you're talking about, like big things like that, or little small things like how many donkeys are in this passage, 5 or 4, like, you know what I mean?
If it doesn't affect your eternity, and if it doesn't change the message of what Jesus did on that cross, then it's
shut up and leave it alone.
Yeah. So I don't care if the earth is flat. I don't care if the earth is round. That doesn't change the fact that Jesus died for my sins, and one day he's coming. Right. Okay. What you want conversation with you all day long. I don't mind. But at the end of the day, like, I'm never going to not be your friend because of something that doesn't minuscule. Change my salvation.
Working in ministry in rural churches over the last 7 years, I have seen more literally friends and people who were supposed to be working together within the church fall out and like not talk to each other for years, or badmouth each other behind each other's backs to the pastor's wife for little stupid insignificant things that might not even have to do with the Bible, but necessarily like preferences over like whatever, what we have for breakfast in the morning, or what this looks like in the church, you know, or this decoration, or this, like, stupid little things.
Even the division in denominations. Okay, so what that you like to pray with your hands in the air? So what that you like to sit in your pew?
So what you like to dance around and praise the Lord?
We are on the same team, and we should act like it.
That's what I think I said this in our last podcast. But like, Satan is doing a really great job of causing so much strife in the church that we're focused on each other, and we're not focused on what we were put here to do, which is to make disciples and baptize them and continue to disciple them and make more. Yes, like, we're so busy squabbling with each other that we can't, there's no way to focus on this issue and this issue.
And nobody's going to want to join Christianity and be a believer
if we're persecuting each other.
And they're looking at us and they're like, it's so chaotic. Why would I want to join that? Why would I want to be a part of that? And we're supposed to be unified. We should be the most unified.
I think when you think persecution, you often think non-Christians to Christians, or one type of people group to another type of people group, but you don't often think of it as being
internal.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't find that word, but that's what I meant, like Christian to Christian or whatever, this people group to this people group. Like, you don't think of it like that, but I would say in America, that's more of what we deal with than not.
Yeah, 100%.
So
here's my thing too. As Christians, we should be the first ones to step up to help. So, there's people who will go and they will be like, oh, you're killing your baby. Like, you shouldn't do that. You're going to go to hell. All of these bad things at mothers who are struggling, even making these choices as they're walking into a clinic to get rid of their baby. And instead, we should be working on being better at adopting and taking care of kids,
loving them, supporting the single mother
that mother needs. Yeah, because it really does take a village, and we're supposed to be a community. And here's the thing: like, there's so many kids out there who don't have families, who don't have anybody to love them, and then they're growing up and they repeat the whole system again. And there shouldn't be, with as many churches and Christians that they say there are in this world,
and as hot of a topic as abortion is,
person out there without a family. There should not be a single mother out there who does not have support because
I agree.
of all of that. And
that's actually what led to us ending our time at the last church. This whole topic kind of exploded because my husband, Chris, from the pulpit said, you cannot scream at mothers that they're going to go to hell or whatever for getting an abortion if at the same time you're going to look down on single mothers and you're not willing to stand there and help them. Like, you cannot scream at them, don't have an abortion, don't do this, if you're going to look down on them for keeping that baby and not helping them and raise them up. And we stood 10 toes down on that. And I still will, because you cannot have hate in your heart for a single mother or allow these children to continue to be put into the system and to do all these things and at the same time scream, keep your baby. Like, you cannot do this too. Do I think that abortion is wrong? Yes, I do. And I think that I am pro-life, but I'm also pro-life beyond just baby in the womb. Like, you have to be pro-life from birth to gestation to death. Yes.
See, the thing is that I can't change people's opinions. Like, my opinion, I believe in what I believe in because of the cross. Other people who aren't Christians, they don't care. They could care less. But they're still going through a hard time. And regardless of if they're Christians, regardless if they want to make the same choices as us, we are called to help. Even in Acts, they said that people would sell everything that they had just to be able to take care of people. And it said there was not a single needy person around in their area. You can't convince me that all of those people are Christians. I guarantee you that the people who would have been needy people probably weren't Christian, but they were still being taken care of because of the Christians in their town. And that's what our town should look like. Our towns should be taken care of because of the Christians, regardless if you have a relationship with Jesus or not.
Right. I agree.
Fun stuff. Persecution.
Yeah. Kind of persecution and more.
We did off on rabbit trails.
And that's okay. That's okay, because this is what our conversations look like. And
I firmly believe that the Holy Spirit's going to bring out what needs to be heard anyways. And if we went on a rabbit trail that might stick out to you, there's a reason we had these conversations.
Right. And if you're going through any type of hardship or persecution, just know that God has a plan and God is going to see you through it, even if you have been like Lexi and I have been in the last year and feeling like, God, where are you? Like, we don't feel like you're listening to us or you're not answering our prayers the way you want it to be. Just remember, like we learned at Lisa Turkers last night, Joseph didn't see God's plan unfolding in front of his eyes either. But at the end of it, he had his audience with Pharaoh, and he was the second most powerful person in Egypt. Not saying that we will end up like that in this great, powerful position, but God's going to see us through, and he's going to use what we're going through to unfold his plan in the future. And I think that that's so important to hold on to, even when that's kind of like the buoy that we need to hold on to while we're drowning.
Yeah. So instead of girl preach, we'll just say, girl, me too.
We are. Lexi and I have been through a very similar struggle within the last year, so.
But anyways, we like to have these podcasts be applicable. And so we just encourage you guys, like, examine yourselves and examine your lives. Are you walking with God?
Right.
Or are you just doing your own thing? And
are you being persecuted? And if you're not, why not?
Yeah. And who's your community? Who do you have to help lift you up so that you're not going alone?
Right.
But yeah, have conversations, you guys, because sometimes we don't talk about things like this, and I think that's why things get so lost.
Right.
You know, and
yeah, so
talk.
Thanks for joining us on Girl Preach Podcast, and we will see you next week.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.